Hello, everybody, and welcome to this first Crossy's Corner podcast of 2021. And we have a fantastic guest for you today, Christian Felkel, British coach for 12 years from 2008 to 2020, Christian.
Indeed. Hello, welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's great for you to be here. There's lots of stuff we're going to get into around the British coaching scene and your new job. Let's just take a check on where you are at the moment. You've moved roles from being sweep coach for the British team to a new job in Germany.
Yes, that's correct. So I will start in March to be chief coach in Germany, overlooking the groups there, including I guess under 23s. We're discussing now exactly what I'm going to do, how am I going to do. I'm hoping to give a different perspective. I just realized that I have lived now outside of Germany for the last 25 years. Wow. So I think long enough time to see the world slightly differently, and maybe giving a different perspective without losing, of course, sight of what's going on in Germany and what has to be done or how it could be done. But I think it's a very challenging but very, very exciting opportunity. And I finished end of December. I finished with the British team, and I finished off as a lead coach for the men's sweep team.
Wow. Okay, so we can let's get into the British team shortly. But I know that you previously have been a chief coach. You were the chief coach in South Africa. Is this a big step up for you, this job in Germany? I mean, how do you view it?
A few more people, I guess. Yes, slightly bigger group of rowers and groups. South Africa probably was the smallest group that you can think of one of the smallest. But I do think what is important with these things is to think about principles, and I think the principles of rowing, how you do it, what you do, are all the same. It's just there are different angles you can take, but I think the principles on how you do things and how you work with other people is the same. And I think the good thing about working in South Africa was you had to really concentrate on the basics. It wasn't all money and throwing money at the problem or anything like this. You had to think about the people. You had to think about what you can get out of each person. So it is every rower, and we come to this maybe later. Every athlete is gold dust, and you look after gold dust. You don't have that much of it. So, and I think that has served me well as a starting point for everything that I have been doing ever since, and I think that will serve me well going to Germany.
That's really interesting, Christian. Can I ask you, how surprised were the athletes that you were coaching that you were going to take another job? I mean, what did they say to you? What was the mood like?
No, again, how often in life, of course, it was a tough decision for me. I do pride myself on loyalty and working with people, but as soon as I explained it and I said, what my thinking is behind it, everyone wished me well. I had a lot of well-wishing athletes saying to me, "Oh, well done. Enjoy your life, or do well, go forward. We understand." And it shows again, the human factor in our sport is still really there. Of course, everyone wants to go to the Olympics and win, but there is a spirit behind everything, and you realize in those moments, and it is more unusual moments, you realize the spirit and how it's still alive, and that people really want other people to do well, and then I would say, with that kind of attitude, when you do well, it's worth a lot more.
So would you have made the move even if Jurgen Grobler had still been chief coach in British rowing, do you think, or would that have been a different system, or is that not a fair question to ask?
No, I mean, situations come up, opportunities come up, and you have to decide when the opportunity comes up what you do with it. And it was clear to me that, whatever Jurgen decided to do for himself, as I just explained, everyone wished me luck because it is my life, my way of forward. It's the same with Jurgen. Jurgen decided whatever he decided at the time. So I say no, it would have not made a difference. It was just different because normally you make a move after an Olympics. We have this rhythm of every 4 years. Of course, this was not possible now. We couldn't wait any longer. Therefore, I had to make the decision when it was presented to me.
You've seen the changes that have happened in British rowing, over the past few years. Paul Thompson, the chief women's coach, has gone. Jurgen Grobler took his role and he was chief coach of both the men and the women. He's now gone. You've gone. What is the... it must be quite difficult in terms of the morale of athletes, I'm guessing, the morale at Caversham, particularly with COVID. I mean, what's your assessment of the mood in the British rowing team, when you left it, and how they've been affected by these changes?
I think actually, to be fair, the mood was very good. I'm still in contact with some coaches. There are coaches, they're all busy. You might have heard Robin Williams has joined. He's not a slouch by any stretch of imagination, a double Olympic gold medal coach. I mean, if I would be athlete there, I would be ashamed if I'm worried. You have Steve Trapmore. May I remind you, he is an Olympic champion in an 8 in the stroke seat. Yeah, with a fantastic performance. I do think that people can see this. Of course, they were surprised, and there were people who were shocked when Jurgen left, because Jurgen was a force of nature and massive influence. And don't forget the amount of success he had. Any place, anywhere in the world, that would have had an enormous influence. But when he left and I took over as lead coach, and we worked and discussed, and people came to me, it was a very interesting thing. People say to me, "Oh, what do we do if we lose a race?" And I said to him, yeah, what do you do? I said, you know what, you better be a man. Because in the past, you might have just leaned on Jurgen, looked at him, and if he gave you a thumbs up, then you would have walked away and said, "Oh, we'll be okay." Now we have to be men, and you have to look at the problems, fix them, and do better. I think with all of those things, it's there are always opportunities. I do find I've seen it many times, and I think there are new people, different people come in. That's why I felt there's only so much to think for me that I'm now the most important person in British rowing. It's lovely to think, but it's not true. There are fantastic people there, and I think they will do a fantastic job. And I do challenge every athlete to look at him or herself, and say, okay, what can I do? Because the one thing I did learn in South Africa is, if you wait for other people to do it for you, or for situations to appear for you to do well, you wait forever.
Yeah, it's last year the athletes went through quite a bruising selection process. I know, and you ended up being in charge of the 4 guys that got a bronze medal in 2019 at the World Championships. What's your take on the selection process so far? I mean, what had happened so far in terms of selecting people before you'd left, and where had British rowing got up to in terms of putting together an Olympic team for 2021?
Okay, I mean, when I left, there was a decision made to begin with that we start off what we had from the selection before we locked down, and that makes a total sense, because the strength of British rowing was consistency, and also as an athlete you build up a portfolio. It's not an event-based selection; it's a process-based selection, which I think is one of the biggest strengths of selections. And hopefully many people listen and think about that a little bit, because I think that's where things can go really wrong if you just go by events. You jump from event to event.
Yeah.
But of course, it has its challenges. Nobody had raced, nobody had rowed. I mean, everything was done on ergometers. So when we were able to come together on the 1st of September in boats, and mainly in pairs, I think it was a great relief. And it was very good. But again, we could not jump immediately into selection mode because people had to come back from the lockdown, had to come back from COVID. It was not clear, and still not clear, what people have to endure once they had COVID. Some, it leaves them very easily. Others hold on to it longer. Definitely, the system is compromised. So we took quite a long time to train. I would say very successfully. And then in December, just before I left, they started to race combinations, mix combinations, and everyone really was going out there and did a fantastic job racing each other. That's the only thing we could do safely. But it shows, to reawaken the intensity. But we had to prepare for that for quite a while, because if you do it too early, you're not doing very well. But I think it worked quite well. Of course, the next phase, that's now the next step, is then to finalize boats, see where they be the same, where there is a change needed, who is changing, who is getting tested. That's the phase that comes up in February, I guess.
With the men's sweep boats, do you think the kind of the two boats, the 4 and the 8, will be roughly the same, or broadly the same in terms of how they were originally selected for the 2020 Olympics? Do you foresee much change in those two units?
I can't say. I mean, it's because, I mean, there is a freedom of whoever is in charge to see what the thinking is. I can only say that when I left, we said there's no need to change right now. We have no evidence to tell us that there is now a secretly faster boat somewhere. So we started off with the 8 and the 4 in the same position. But even when we selected in March 2019, it was clear that it wasn't a final selection. There would have been looked into the boats anyway, seeing if there is something to make better. But of course, there's also the training and testing for everyone that is in the boat to get better, which can strengthen your position. So I think I used to call it a hybrid system at the time. There is something you take with you, but of course, at some stage somebody might overtake you.
Yeah. The chances, the 8 won a bronze medal, your 4 won a bronze medal. From what you've seen so far, what are the chances of Britain upgrading those medals to a gold in Tokyo, which is, I guess something that Britain has won every year since every Olympics since 1984.
Yes.
What do you think the chances are?
I think, look, the chances are good. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing these jobs, and have been. But as you know, the 4 only lost by 0.8 seconds. The 8 was a little bit more. So yes, there is definitely a lot of work has to be done. It's clear there's some gaps in the performance, and that's the job to fill them. But I can't see why that can't be done, because when I see how the guys are training, the effort they make, the commitment, then I would say their chances are there.
Yeah.
But, and as I say, we had there's still people that were not selected. There were over six guys, plus there might be, and again, it was the idea, if someone from the outside would or would not be able to join, there's still a possibility to strengthen both boats, not just one.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at the news as much as anybody else. I see there's been the news today that Tokyo has extended the range of travellers, not being able to come in with another coronavirus outbreak. What's your take on whether the 2021 Olympics will happen in Tokyo, Christian?
Look, no one will say no for the time being. I think the Prime Minister of Japan said it will happen, but I can also tell you that that it will not happen when it's not possible. You can see already, that we're now in the third wave, that was not anticipated. I do know, I guess it will get better now, so from April onwards. And the question of this vaccination will play a massive role if they can convince or get everyone to get vaccinated before they arrive. And I hear this seems to be the idea. I'm not quite sure. The information was not very clear that people have to quarantine, then get vaccinated, maybe, hopefully, and then could be allowed to go to Tokyo. However it will be an enormous undertaking, but it will be also enormous to cancel the Olympics. So I can see that everyone will do their utmost best to make it happen. But I can see there will be moments on this journey that we can't foresee. I mean, is it isn't a moment nobody would do it, but a month in this game is a long time again, And I just, funnily enough, I just arrived in Germany, and handball is not a big sport in Britain, but it is massive in Europe, and they have the handball world championships have just started. They start today with a plan of 32 teams in Egypt, and they have completely locked off. They allow no spectators, and they have basically bubbled off the whole group. However they've done it, I haven't seen any details. But of course, people have criticized the idea that they're holding a tournament of that size in a pandemic, But they're doing it. They're going for it, and 2 or 3 teams had to cancel because they had outbreaks at home with players. So anything's possible. I can't tell you. I mean, you could well arrive there and half of your opponents aren't arriving for the regatta. I don't know. I mean, it would be, I really don't know. I think we have to play it by ear and maybe keep patient, not pressurizing the wrong people all the time. Just let intelligence and common sense in some ways prevail and see what is possible. But I'm sure the closer we get, the more the discussion will come up, and then there will be different nations might take different approaches anyway, saying I can't risk it. We're not going to do that. We're not going to a place where 10,000 people come together. I mean, even this is not even fully understood how individual people will decide. I've seen, for example, on this handball World Championship, 3 or 4 of very prominent German players have decided not to take part in it. They just say, I'm not making myself available. It's too dangerous for me and my family. So I think there will be a whole lot of things will play a role. We have to see what is possible at closer to the time.
Christian, I kind of want to ask you a little bit about the feeling at Caversham, or the mood at Caversham, in terms of UK sport seems to have changed the funding criteria to make the athlete experience more important than just performance, medal results at the end of the day, so that maybe to be a little bit more cuddly to athletes and be less hard-nosed and focus on performance. Do you think that was overdue for Caversham, or do you think that's a system that will see, the number of medals drop? In terms of, I think, Caversham has been known as being a tough place to be and very focused on performance. How do you see that?
Okay. Okay. First of all, I can't speak for Caversham, and I can see whatever the UK sport is thinking. I mean, is a very interesting development, and to be fair, it is worldwide. I've been looking around now. The discussion of athletes' health and understanding is not new, and I would probably think that in Germany it's maybe gone already a little bit further. Maybe people were discussing that, and I do think there is something that has to be understood and discussed. And I would say where maybe the misunderstanding and the problem comes in when you use these words as bullying or mental health or hard-nosed or medals only or whatever. You can say this, but I can only say in my 12 years that I have been at British rowing, I have never had a situation where we stood there and saying, yeah, this person is in trouble. We kick him through now because it's medals only. I mean, that has never happened. Not in my time, not in my presence. I can't speak for others where they did something else. But what has happened is we had to tell athletes, you're not good enough. You know, that happens. But some of it was clearly to be seen. So sometimes people agree, sometimes people don't agree. So I would say what I don't like is the narrative. If something is wrong, yeah, it has to be right. So if you bully someone, if you're disrespectful, if you shout, if you risk the health of an athlete, if you don't inform them, by all means, these things should be addressed. You know, if there's a problem with this, but to make these overarching statements that basically coaches are equal to harassment, hard-nosed athletes, endangering athletes, you know, this is nonsense. Absolutely. There are thousands of coaches, and they're all the ones that I know. They're doing a very good job. You know, of course, on a human level, we connect with our athletes and we work as hard as we can that the experience is a good one. But I do understand, I do believe that the ones I met, and you are one of them, you won an Olympic gold medal. I'm sure your experience was wonderful at that moment, and it lasts a lifetime. If I tell you now, you know what, you can do half of what you've done and you still get it, I'll be lying to you. It's nonsense, absolute nonsense. It's not going to work. You know, it's you know what our business was. We have to pass on the information. You know, we have to pass on reality. We have to test in training the reality of the idea to go into an Olympic Games, rowing the final and crossing the line first. If this would be easy, thousands would be doing it. But it isn't easy. It is unbelievably difficult. And it's not unbelievably difficult on the day. That's as well. It's unbelievably difficult to do all these years to get there. You're not getting there by doing 3 months of training and enjoying yourself. It's just not possible. It's, you know, we can talk till the cows come home. It's not going to work this way. You have to create situations that are not pleasant, you know, so that people can test themselves out against this. Yeah, and of course there are limits, and you know, we can discuss those limits. And I think it's clear to make sure that nobody gets willingly harmed. Yeah, but the idea that people do something and train and that might be or might not be harmful to them. Our job is also not to tell people what they cannot do or what they can do. You know, I can't say someone, no, you can't run now. It's not very good. You know, there's a scientific study running over 90 minutes is not a good idea. So stop, please. That's not possible. People can run as long as they want. So I do think the responsibility is on both sides. But I think the narrative that has been developed now is dangerous and partially, I would say, wrong. Absolutely. I do not accept that on principle, everyone that wins something has been mistreated. You know, I do understand that people had very hard times, and I do understand that people have been mistreated. And I do understand that terrible things have happened, and we should go after those people and make sure they never put a foot into the sport again. Absolutely, absolutely. You know, there must be, and I think that's the other thing, there must be a mechanism where people can talk about these things, and there is a mechanism to look into it. You know, what is totally wrong, and we have seen it. If institutions think, okay, because of my good reputation, I have to, there's always this idea, we have to protect the reputation by pushing it under the carpet, which creates exactly the opposite. I think the best way to serve is to go clearly out and about these things, but you have to go in there with a very, very open mind and very carefully, because you destroy people's lives on both sides. You know, an accusation is just a few words in a newspaper and job done, you know?
Yeah.
I give you an example. I mean, I must say, you know, I watched, was it Panorama? About you know, there was a lady there that had wrote before, I think I met her once or twice, who sits there and actually tells the TV audience that we have pre-prepared sweat rooms, yeah, where we basically sweat down people as a federation, you know, and even so, we all know it's dangerous. It's the opposite. You know, it's the opposite of what we're doing. We're working with lightweights for so long time to find out and work so that they can lose weight safely, you know? So it's almost the opposite of them. And she wasn't even involved in that. It wasn't even that she was a lightweight and had to sweat down and had to say, I was forced to do that. She just says that. She just says these things. And of course, it fits well but one has to counteract this narrative quite strongly, otherwise it goes all the wrong way.
Yeah, I guess some of the things, from as an outsider that you hear about rowing at Caversham, some of the training camps and the load, and in particular that camp in the Sierra Nevada, the altitude camp, the land-based camp. I mean, I think there was a film. I think it was maybe John Collins was filmed. Bit of tears and crying about just tiredness. How tough is that camp, and is that something that you'd look to have in the German system?
It's a camp of champions. You make your champions there. That's what you do. So I have a mentor over years now. I came across that in 2013 because UK Sport, had this leadership course that they allowed me to take part in. So it was very good. And he was with the SAS for many years, and he ended up as a trainer there, bringing new recruits or people that want to go to the SAS. They go. They get tested there, and they're doing so a grueling process, and they end up in the jungle. So that's the end. And so we discussed that now, and they said, we're not going to the jungle because it's hot there and rains a lot or whatever. We go to the jungle to find out about the character of the person. Because if you go into a war and if you go in a group and it's life and death, you need to know about the character of people. They don't want the fittest guy. They don't want the guy that can run half naked for 3 hours through the jungle and be unaffected. They want the guy that has the right character and can be a team player when he is almost at the end of his tether. That's what they want. And why do they want this? Because they want to survive. So we row only. They go out and fight. So what's good for them is good for us. So Sierra Nevada teaches you about your character. Partially, and the training comes with it, because if you can do it there, you can do it in many other places. Yeah. So I think I read your book, and the point of these things is you were tested all the time. There were many times you didn't need to do it. You could have walked away. You could have done this. Could have done that. They were not pleasant moments, but those are the moments that defined you, and then you were rewarded at the end of your journey, or of one of your journeys, with a gold medal. But it was not given. It was not. You had to go through other big problems, and I think that's what we have to understand. Overcoming toughness and a horrible time is not bad. It teaches you a lot. We should relish these moments to go out there and push the boundaries.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Christian. Thank you for that. Can I have a look at in 2016 you were coaching the 8 with Jurgen Grobler. I'm interested in how co-coaching with a guy like Jurgen Grobler works, because he always wants to take the lead boat. He wants to be the one that's doing it. I mean, what do you bring to a party when you're co-coaching with Jurgen Grobler, and what indeed did you bring to that 8 in 2016?
That's okay. I mean, this is a fair question. I always say it in these times, I don't want to overestimate my input there. It's very difficult. I might not be able to answer this so easily. But I wouldn't say, the word co-coaching is then very tricky. It was clearly he was the lead coach. He was leading everything. So it's a very different operation to coaching a 4, But on the other hand, for me, I think was an absolute fantastic opportunity to be there every session. I mean, I've been there anyway most of the time, but actually doing it session by session, discussing things. On the upside, so it's a different involvement to when you do it yourself. But of course, the upside is you can suddenly look a little bit more relaxed, sort of one step removed, because he was doing the coaching, and then we discussed a lot. So I think it was done in discussion, and it takes a lot of talking. And for me, just to understand how he works, where I could add something to it when I speak, when I'm not speaking, sort of get an idea how that works. And so it wasn't for me, I didn't feel like going in there and inserting myself too much. In the end, it worked quite well. We had some some meetings, some discussions where I could develop some ideas what we want to try, how we can do it better, especially when some races didn't go so well, you know. Yeah, it was again a different experience. You know, I've done now co-coaching a few times, interestingly enough, and it was of course every time it's a completely different dynamic. You know, and I'm just trying. You know, my idea is often then to hold things together and finding ways of getting everyone to operate and at their best level. That's what I'm thinking. That's maybe one of my strengths. You know, to not tell people what to do and try to push them into my mold, or rather to find out what a person can do and then see if I can't amplify this.
Yeah. So was it different, your co-coaching experience with John West in 2010 and in the 2012 Olympics? I get the impression you were more on the sort of more like equals on that sort of level.
2012, yeah. And you know, that was my first one. Or we started in 2010 already, and I must give, and I want to give an enormous amount of credit to John West. You know, because when I started there with him, he was already in the system for quite a while. I think he came back from the Olympics anyway with a silver medal in 2008 and so on. And he was keen. You know, you meet. I tell you now, there are a lot of coaches who wouldn't want to do this. They don't like it. I find it stressful and difficult, and it's not easy. You have to talk a lot, and that's what we did. We started off talking a lot. So basically, we were coaching, then sitting, talking things through. Everyone had a different angle. So I think over time, then we could operate very well. So if he wasn't there, I could do work with the 8. If he was there, he could do with the work with the 8. We did things together at the regatta. So then in the end, it worked quite well, but it needs a lot of amount of talking and also discussing how one wants to operate with each other, you know. So we had this idea that you back your colleague, even if it's something different to what you perceived should have happened at least twice, yeah. Then you go afterwards and you find out what happened with the change, but before you really think it's a problem, because, you know, life's life. If you immediately get stressed just because something changes, but it's also not a very good idea to immediately jump in and say, no, we didn't agree, we don't do that. So we wanted to back ourselves no matter what, because you can imagine with 9 rowers and 2 coaches, there's a lot of communication that can go on and create confusion. So we try to eliminate as much of that as we could.
Yeah, I mean, you must be one of the best qualified co-coaches in the world, because I'm trying to think of other examples of where that happens, and I can't think of many. No.
I think it's something I like to do. You know, I like to work with people. That's what I was thinking. Is a good way of utilizing these ideas now in my new job. Is I don't want to tell people what to do. I don't want them to do what I want to do as such. I just want to create a situation where we have principles and values, saying, okay, this is what we want, and then you have a lot of space. You can work with it. We just have to have a bit of an understanding, and then I think people can bring themselves in. Otherwise, you don't get new ideas in. You can't do anything if you only stick to your own plan. It works if you're on your own. Okay, that's what you do. But I do believe even coaches that work on their own, they look over the fence here and there, or go to a symposium or somewhere, discuss something, and then come back and use those ideas. We just had to do it a little bit quicker, and we did it between the 2 of us, you know. Yeah.
In that 8 in 2012, there was a lot of disappointment. I think at the end of that bronze medal race, that the 8 hadn't won gold from some of the athletes. Do you think that 8 delivered on its potential, or was there a way through in terms of coaching, maybe things you could have done differently that might have secured a different result in that 2012 Olympics?
Yeah, I listened to Martin Schmidt, and I can assure him we were ahead for a while. But, you know, as we always say, the last stroke counts, and you only win at the 2,000 meter line. So it was a fantastic race. for the Germans as well, and I think they showed the toughness there, and that's one of those things. Of course we could have done things better. We would have wished for a better result, but I think one of the problems was that maybe a little bit that we were always feeling the idea we were always chasing something, and I think that takes maybe a little bit the freedom away and the relaxation to do your best. So it was always thought, because in 2010 we were very close, a few tenths.
That's the closest you got to them, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was just a few tenths. And I think instead of being happy, and thinking, oh yeah, good, we're coming in here, we're fresh. In 2009 we were only fifth in the final, but the hype was such, that has to be this way. And then it was just chasing. I think it was completely unnecessary. I remember in 2011 it was not much different. I just felt relief that we had a second place, because it was again just chasing. Every time not winning was a loss, and so I think we never developed enough freedom of just expressing ourselves, And I think in 2012 a little bit the same thing was just chasing this. Of course, everyone wanted to win, and I think the guys were more than capable of winning, But that is maybe it is a difficult thing in this whole system. Remember, there was a 4 as well, and with the whole vibe, and so it's more difficult, I mean, yeah, it's if you think as a nation, you put out an 8, a 4, and a pair in sweep, and we managed many times in between. But even at that particular Olympics, it was a gold and 2 bronze. There would have been nations that would have been very happy, So, the finding that balance and getting that right and having that freedom when you're in such a situation is not easy. And I think that's what we lost, the freedom to make our own decisions, a little bit. It was chasing the next stroke, so to speak.
One of the things I think Greg Searle, who was in those 8s of 2010, 2011 and 2012, he kind of looks at the 8 of 2010 and he says, emotionally, we were a closer unit. We were more together. And he differentiates that from the crews in 2011 and 2012. Is that something you see at all?
Yeah, we had some discussions afterwards. Yes, I think the thing with the selection bit, and that's maybe something that doesn't come out on the day, and often is that, of course, every rower, they build alliances. You're making a crew, you're making a team. But the way it was done, and always has been done, is you don't come back. Okay, silver medalist in 2010, everyone gets slapped on the shoulder. We train a year and we try it again. Basically, you have to split. And then it starts again where you get in. So by the time we came together, then it was a slightly different team, and not everyone was on the same page, And I think maybe that is the tricky thing. Then what we didn't do maybe well enough is to weld into a team quickly enough once the selection is made, and forget what happened before. And you train with your teammates in a different boat, but forget that and concentrate on where you are,
Yeah,
I think that could be made better,
Yeah. Of those athletes that you coached in those 8s and indeed in the 4s after the Rio Olympiad, maybe you can talk about some of them and some of their qualities. I'm kind of resisting to say who was the best athlete you coached, but there must be a number of athletes that have got, some different qualities and things that have impressed you about them and that stood out that you recall.
Yeah. Yeah, good. It was interesting to work with someone like Constantine Louloudis, was a very different. That was he was a very different approach to many of the others, because he also kept a lot of the things that he wanted to do differently, going to Oxford and doing his thing there. So it was a more of a fluid in and out. And, he had some tough times with injuries and so, but he was really, he had a way to roll. He had this rhythm feel and holding the power and these things. And I think it was an interesting person to work with, and really one. I felt, he had a conviction about himself, which I think is quite important. And that's what I try to tell younger athletes, to relax a little bit and really concentrate on themselves and trust themselves a little bit, especially when it goes wrong. I can't look into his head. I'm sure there were moments when he was screaming out, It was the same a little bit with somebody like George Nash, I worked with him quite a bit because I coached a pair with Will Setch and George Nash. Two people that are completely different. I mean, like really, really different, but they worked really well together. And George Nash, the reason why he sticks out, and another story I tell a lot is we did selections, the whole year, but in the end we did seat racing, and George Nash lost to Tom Ransley by 0.2 of a second. And he was really upset that he didn't get in, So but then the next day he came. He was in the pair with Will Setch, and they never looked back. He wasn't looking over his shoulder. He wasn't talking about where he could have been. He hopped into that boat and he made it go, and he worked for it, and he was 100% committed. Yeah. And I think that's maybe what some of the rowers sometimes had difficulties with. Once this election was finished, they couldn't move on. Yeah, so there was always a part of their soul was where they thought they should have been, and that can be difficult, It can be difficult if you can't really sort of let go and then move forward within a short period of time. I guess the intensity sometimes, the intensive selection is very high, but the ones who could move on, I think, it makes it easier.
Yeah, that's a great story, Christian. In terms of the way you like people to row, I know that you have said, one of your influences was Harry Mahon and the way that Harry coached. What would you say about the way you like people to row, and how have you been influenced by someone like Harry Mahon? And what's the hallmark of a Christian Felkel crew?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there is still a little bit the art, because if you think of it, if you add the numbers up, and people have done that, and you can see it in a boat, even in a pair or for any boat, is you put two very strong people together, and they're not very fast, funnily enough, and then others they row very quickly. And I'm not even saying, and you can see there are different ways of rowing it. If you look at different pairs and different fours, they look differently, but had enormous success at the time. I do think it's important, and I guess one of the main understanding is the idea of rhythm, that there's a rhythm between how you propel your boat and how you let the boat run. And I think a bit of an understanding, that's what came out. That's what I try to teach people, to listen to the boat. So if you could imagine, the boat could also talk. Yeah. So you have a pair, and of course, these guys can talk to each other, or they shout out frustrations, but the boat also talks. Yeah. And the boat has also frustrations. If you kick it all the time, you can imagine how that boat thinks, for crying out loud, why are you doing this now? You noticed already it's not going very far. You're still kicking me. So I think to try maybe to bring the voice of the boat into the equation and say, listen, feel what is going on underneath your seat? What's going on under the water? How does it sound? How does it feel? Is it actually moving? Or you're just repeating one thing. And if you feel you're too slow, you go harder, and that is something, that's what people do often. And I think to teach them that you don't need to row harder, you need to row faster. So we have to find ways to row faster, not harder, which sounds logic when you say it, but often I've seen people just row harder. Oh, no, harder. Come, you need to go harder. Oh, I didn't win. Maybe I didn't go hard enough. No, you didn't go fast enough. You have to accelerate the boat to the highest possible speed and then hold it there, So the two, and also the real understanding that there are these two very, very different systems, the propulsion or the acceleration of the boat, and then the part where you can do absolute nothing but not disturb, So if you have to do everything, and then you have to do nothing. If you think of that way, nothing, don't do anything that stops this boat, but then do everything to bring it up to speed again. There is a natural speed loss, and you can learn that, and then you have the rhythm. Thinking in that kind of terms. That's what I do. I sound and feel, and and you can watch it. I mean, watch the 2016 8, and watch the faces. Watch 108 rows. It's completely different. These people were just in the rhythm. The faces were concentrating, but they look. If you see the faces in 2012, they look different. Yeah, it was like, try, we must try, we must. In 2016, they're just moving that boat as hard as they could. Yeah. It's not like that they were perfect, but if you see how everyone tuned in, the faces were very different. And I think that you can see already how people can start learning, or how people can move a boat, And that's I often speak about Usain Bolt. I said, if you think of Usain Bolt, he gets 100 meters, he runs under 10 seconds, under 9 seconds, yeah? And still there are phases. He goes out, you duck down, you go very hard, very fast. But then you have to open out. You have to open up. The legs have to get longer. The rhythm, if that's not coming, it's it. You can't win. You can't. You have to come out. And in rowing, it's the same thing. To come out, to relax, even in all that intensity. And what is more intense than 100-meter run, But still there, you see between each stroke, when he touches the ground, he relaxes. Energy, relax. Energy, relax. Another rhythm. So I think that's maybe the best I can describe my ideas of rowing.
That's really interesting. I mean, borrowing from athletics, was there ever, during your time in British rowing, where you would borrow ideas or, training patterns from other sports?
No, not so much. I mean, we were pretty set in our training program, that has delivered 10 Olympic gold medals or 12. So we stick with it, which I saw is in my point is something that is sometimes underestimated, the simplicity, the simplicity of the training program, and not to have to go off every year to very different ways. A small adjustment, something tried out, but the frame is there, and it has been successful for a very, very long time, because I think there is a lovely simplicity behind the sport,
Yeah. One of the things that struck me talking about technique was that the British team seemed to, the technique in some of the early World Cups, I mean, maybe the guys are tired, is a relatively lower level, and then they go to Silveretta and have the training camp in Avis, and the technical proficiency comes up. I wonder if that's something that you saw in the boats.
Yes, well, I mean, we used to talk a little bit about it in the beginning. We coached mainly from the bike, so you have natural distance. And so, I mean, this is not everyone's cup of tea, but the idea is that you can accelerate your coaching input throughout the year. So you're not hammering, you can get more and more intense. We do a bit more, then we go on training camps, then you have the time. I do think we could do more with that. I think that's definitely an area where the rowers and the coaches should pay a little bit more attention to the technical proficiency. I think, if I'm honest, I still think we have super committed athletes there, but if you would have an efficiency rating, I think the engine is not bringing it all onto speed. And that could be fixed with rowing. So I think this year now we try to put a lot more effort into early intervention to see if we can't accelerate that already, or could accelerate already.
Which sort of crews or countries do you like to watch when you go to World Cups or World Championships? I mean, who really stands out for you?
Yeah, the Germans and the 8. We're talking about it. Yeah. No. Welcome to all my German friends, but no, it is fantastic. And I think it was interesting to listen to Martin Schmidt a little bit there.
Richard Schmidt.
Richard Schmidt, yeah. Martin is a bit, yeah. Sorry, but it was interesting to listen to this, how he described it, how he thinks. But I do agree. I looked a lot, because they're very precise and very sharp, but not rough, not too hard, I think that works really well. And I used to, when we talked about leg drive, this is one of my quirks there. So every time we start coaching and people talk to me, we talk about leg drive, I say, okay, go onto the website, Seville 2002, and you watch the Italian lightweight double, yeah? in the final, then you know what leg drive is, because those guys is absolute like a piston. The body is completely level. It moves very nice pull, but because of the legs going so strong and so clear, the boat just runs. It's straight out. They can hold their cadence. They never look that they get overloaded, but at the same time, they don't look that they're rushing, even though the rate is quite high. All shows you that they're in tune with this. But leg drive, that's the race to watch. It's a bit old now, but it still shows you what's possible there and how well that is executed.
I've made a note of that, actually. Do you remember the names of the athletes in that double? I couldn't remember them.
Pettinari is at least one of them. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
That one I can't remember now. No, old hand in the business. Hand. But they're in a really good time. I mean, Seville gave us quite some quick times. That was a time when the British pair broke the then now pedestrian world best time of 6:14 point something. So yes, we know now that it wasn't that fast. But yeah, it was a great regatta, and I think that I always use this as one of the examples to look at leg drive, because I find it is so brutal and so well executed.
Talking of those record times, if you look at the times, I have heard it said that perhaps one of the relatively slowest times of the international boat classes is the men's 4, and that I wonder why you think that is. Is the standard in that event lower?
Yeah, no, look, and that's maybe it's a great example when people say, oh yeah, look, well, that's easy, that's what we can do. And I remember it was I think once before the German women's quad, I think, held the world record for a very long time. Yeah. I think, and there's another interesting, before I come to this, what is really interesting to me is the Australians dominated more or less the event until the last race. Nevertheless, if you look how high they're rated and you compare to their times, you can see the danger that rate is not the answer. So what is the answer is distance per stroke. That's for me a key learning, because if you look at the rates that they are rating and the rest of the field, and we are following a little bit. I mean, we rode it was about 37 as an average, or even a bit higher, maybe probably 38, and the time just average, So you can see already the answer can't be the rate higher. The answer must be distance per stroke. And the 537 was rowed at an average stroke rate at 35.5.
Really?
So yes. So and there are way. I mean, we're nowhere near this time in the moment. I think we were saying you have to row. We were happy to go first under 550, and then we were saying, okay, we should go under 540 if you want to be competitive. We haven't achieved that. I think the best was a 42, for us not even, but I think the best time now was a 42 from a wing boat. So you can see we're still quite a bit off. Why? Look, it's always difficult to say the standard. Look, it is what it is. You can clearly see it, because in the same regatta, if you want to win the 8, you have to row 97% plus 98%. Yeah. So you can clearly see that there is something missing in that 4. What's going on? But I think what it also shows you is, come the right crew, it's not a foregone conclusion to win the gold medal there. So people must be keeping that in mind, that you can say that, but if the crew comes, then you have no chance. So you have to do the work. You have to roll fast enough to win. And if you then win anyway, that's a bonus. But I think in our preparation, we always make sure that we not lose sight of what's really going on, what's really important, and not getting sidetracked by a boat class that happened to be a little bit easier, Yeah. You see it that way. And I think people also learn with each time. Maybe more people concentrating on the big boats. I mean, what is happening to Canada and the US, but look, we're saying this now. It comes at 4, rows 5:38, and we're all looking because we get beaten by 5 seconds. So we have to be careful. Just because people haven't done the job or couldn't do it or whatever it is, it will be done. So yeah, I'm holding my breath, but it will be an interesting event. It is quite open now. It's not clear. It's no one is there that clearly will win the Olympics in the Cox's 4, I would say. I think there are a lot of people that hope for it, wish for it, want it. While I would say in the 8, it's a bit tougher. I think the Germans have laid great groundwork, have also shown resilience again, That's also not to underestimate. This is, if you always lead on the front, maybe that happened to the Australians. I don't know what happened there, but the Germans have been doing this under different and very difficult circumstances, and they have only been beaten when they had been beaten. Never ever have they given up, and I think they've shown great resilience. So I would say they are the clear favourites for the 8.
That's really interesting. You talked about the Australians there. I mean, what did you make of the way that they paddle? With Ian Wright has this quite deliberate pause at the finish, and then he wants to come up and just time perfectly the front end. And what's your view on that?
Yeah, I don't like the pause at the back. You want to time the front. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. But you know what? I hesitate to argue other people's approach in that way. He has his reasons. It has. The point is, every time he wins a race, it has worked for him. Who am I to say he shouldn't do it? I'm just thinking from the logic of me. I would like to have the handle recycled at a time when the boat is at a high speed, and you have the ability to do it without harming the boat at all, and then because as long as you don't move the seat, you hardly move any weight, so you can do a lot. And if you sit in front of yourself, you stretch out your arms, and even you rock over your body a little bit, you have covered an enormous amount of way with hardly anything done. And then you lift your knees and you're already there. So timing the front, in my opinion, would just aid that. If you have to do all of it, I think you just might tie yourself up a little bit.
Yeah.
The question with those things is, anyway, you have to check it in the racing, because then you have to measure and actually look what really happens, because we even. We work on this all the time, and you can see when I show the guys what they're doing in racing or under full power, it's unfortunately not what I want, because otherwise I think they would have been faster already. So I think these things, sometimes you see, best example is Romania. They paddle at stroke at 17, or have been for many years, and he's very deliberate in paddling, but then they race at 42, and has no relation to what you see them paddling around there. I mean, they have their internal logic, but to me, I saw this, but it doesn't tell me anything. When they were racing, they were not racing at 32; they were racing at 42. So there was then no difference to any other crew,
Yeah.
Maybe, however you get people to follow a process, maybe that's the most important thing. To say that you have a bit of a philosophy in a process, that you want to follow, and then you look what the physical requirements are. I'm always saying, when people talk about technique, I'm not quite sure if we understand that correctly. The technique is, you have to follow the physical requirements. Every boat slows down. Every boat accelerates. You cannot row a boat at constant speed. So nobody can overcome that. Everyone puts a blade in and the boat slows down. There's no one in the world that has overcome that. So you have to work within this physical world, and then you have a style of what you think you could make the least damage in one area and make the most out of the other area. And I come back to what I before said, you have the acceleration phase. So how can I make the most out of that? And how can I do the least to the boat when I can't influence it positively, which I can't. This is also a fact, unless we change rowing,
Yeah. One of the things that your athletes did this year was there was a very exciting phase of breaking records for 2K on the ergo.
Yes.
Were you surprised by the scores that you were seeing and the times coming in?
Yeah, we did a lot of ergo rowing, an enormous amount. I believe that other countries started rowing much earlier. We did not row until the 1st of September. One must not forget that. No one touched a rowing boat before the 1st of September. So we had a lot of time on these ergs. And I think, but that shows you the quality of the guys. Even if they sit in their kitchen and working on this like removed Olympics, they still have this ability to motivate themselves, to try that out, to look at it. And I can only say, I mean, great respect, absolutely great respect to these guys to do this under those circumstances. That's why you kind of know you have the right guys, you know, because I think that's another level of training that you have to do in isolation. But I think if you do so much ergo, there was a good chance, and people want to try something out, you know. And we always knew. I mean, you know, most of he has been around for a while, and you know, it was definitely possibly for him to move on and ergo. I think Tom George, yeah, he's a good guy, but he really diligently prepared himself for that, you know, and worked on these things, and you know, was quite realistic how he did things, and I think he got a very nice payback for that, you know. He just had to bring all of it into the water, you know.
Is there anybody that stands out? There's a lot of new athletes that have come into the British squad, particularly in the last couple of years. New names that sometimes people are less familiar with. You mentioned Tom George as one. Is there anyone else who stands out in terms of qualities that you'd think of?
Yeah, I'm a bit, you know, it's still fresh. I'm a bit hesitant to make big short shout-outs. But no, I think, look, when new people come in, I think there are no doubt new people, you know, the new stars, and that's maybe these opportunities. There are no stars yet. And I think the understanding of when you potentially can be really good and you are really good, they're two different things. I think the most dangerous word in sport is the word talent. We should avoid it at all costs. Do not talk about talents. Do not say to any rower, he's a talent. That destroys it.
Yeah.
That things there is some built in. You know, we have people that had to work for this. If you think of Tom James, you know, what a tough time he had physically. You know, he wasn't the best. But he had many other aspects to bring things together. He had to overcome illnesses, and you know, I followed his way for quite a while, and he came out with the gold medal because he was diligent and he could understand it. And I think with the young ones we have now, we have some tall guys, we have some big guys, and of course you have got people that can pull already ergs, but that's only number one. To learn to train intelligently, smartly, every single day. That's what they have to learn. That's what they can't do yet, some of them, and that's what makes the difference, you know. And that's what we have to teach as coaches, to saying training, but also train every day. First we say finish a camp, then make a great camp, but don't make a great day and then don't finish the camp. Yeah, always our first thing. First you finish the work, then you can think about topping it out, you know. Yeah. And I think some people, it's more difficult for some to understand that. They look around, they compare scores, and they get themselves into the rat race, you know, and then they lose sight of who they are. They just try to beat the next guy, and of course, eventually, it will go wrong, you know. So I would say that's why I think for British rowing, there are great rowers. There are really fantastic guys that come around, and I'm just hoping. You know, that they get led well, and for some it's the first Olympics, you know, you know, they have to manage all of those expectations. Of course, for us, we always talked about the British, and you tell them that the four hasn't lost since this and this and that, but to them it's the first. They're sitting in a boat. There's Olympics. First of all, get yourself into the final, then go and win it. You know, so you have to hold that balance. There has been since 2016 a very big change of names. I think Mo is now the last surviving player, you know. There's one left, and the rest is all coming over time. It's newer and has to find their own way.
Yeah. Christian, we've been nearly an hour now. Just, I don't know where the time's gone, but just maybe a couple of questions. What are you looking forward to in terms of your new job in German rowing?
I look forward to a challenge to help my own country, you know, to excel, to see, you know, to learn and see what they have in mind, how they see themselves, and then maybe to explain to them how I see Germany as a rowing nation, what is possible, what should be possible. You know, there are, as we know, there's women, men, scull and sweep. You know, how is it going there? Why are things going really well? Why are things going not so well? Is there something we can do? Talk a bit realistically about expectations, what people do. So I think it's an absolute exciting time to bring people together and give them maybe a new outlook from someone who hasn't been in the system for a long time and looks and sees it from the outside for what it is. You know, not saying that I have all the answers to begin with, but at least I have some answers or some ideas, and hopefully people are open enough and interested enough to engage and see what we can do. I think, you know, there is potential everywhere.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Christian. Ian Weir just has asked a question. I think in a couple of weeks' time, Jurgen's going to be sitting where you are now in Crossy's corner, and you know, all of some questions. Maybe you can think of a good question or questions to ask Jurgen.
I'm sure your audience will have a lot of questions to answer. I spent 12 years with him. I asked all my questions. I think no. I just want to say it was a highlight for me, and I said it in a little tweet. It's very difficult to say. Maybe it gives me the chance. It was a highlight for me to work with someone like Jurgen for that time. It is something special, and to see it firsthand, and even seeing in the years that we did it together, how he operates and how he operates with athletes. And of course, he is a very, very tough man. Absolutely, absolutely. But I think especially how he worked with athletes left deep impressions on the guys, you know. So even some who didn't make it, he was always honest. He was definitely not someone who would tell you something that's not true. And I think, yeah, it was a real journey, and I wouldn't have want to miss it. I'm really was excited to work with one of the greats in our sport, and I hope people will see that and see it for what it is. Not only where he came from, but also especially now he did it in a new system, so you could see he was very adaptable, and he was he sees it for what it is, and I think he could operate in it, and he understands rowing very, very well, you know.
Wow.
So yeah, I hope he is, you know, he's feeling good now, enjoying himself, and I wonder what the next challenge is for him. He looked still very energetic and fresh, so I'm waiting for that, you know.
Christian, you've been marvelous. You've taken every question that I've thrown at you, and you've dealt out some fantastic answers. I can't thank you enough. We're coming to the end of the live broadcast now, so we'll end things from there. But just to say thanks everybody for tuning in. Quite a lot of viewers on this live broadcast, and thank you, Christian, for speaking so openly and honestly.
Thank you very much.